drink coffee.
Okay, I'm recording.
No.
Mrs.
What?
McLeish, it's running through her veins, I think.
Yeah, I do notice that, and I'm kind of always jealous.
Try
She
your
loves coffee.
Yes. Every day, she has Starbucks, so I can like
Yep,
smell it.
she does.
Is our Avery a Scarlet Letter?
Yes.
That's nice.
I don't know how to use
I read some of it out loud to my sister last night, and she's like, I didn't understand anything you just said. So like, in like 4 sentences, I described like what happened in 1 sentence. She was like, why did it take them that long to explain it?
It's
I
just
don't
hot.
know.
What'd you say?
I'm not sure how to use it.
Okay, let's talk about duplicity. What's it mean?
Deception.
Deception.
I did not expect that.
And what is it? Noun, adjective? Noun. You could say the duplicity of the situation, blah, 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 blah. I think duplicitous is a word. I would go to dictionary.com, but server's down.
Did you say her mind was full of duplicity?
Yes, you could say that.
What's your mind?
What about her personality?
Deceitfulness in speech
That
and
is so
conduct.
cool, Marie.
It's a noun. What'd you say, Marie?
Said her personality is close.
Get it, girl.
There's a movie called Duplicity. You should watch it sometime.
That's a good movie. Yes. Well, this makes so much more sense. I was like, what does duplicity mean? So like now that I know that, I was like,
Yeah.
ah.
I
No, it
thought
makes
it meant like,
sense, doesn't it?
like 2 things.
Yeah, I thought it was like the ability to duplicate.
Well, there's like duplex switches. Yeah.
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 That makes sense.
Because normally like
It's double deception.
She was full of duplicity.
Yes. Yes. All right, let's get back to Hester.
I was like, oh, and there was Lauren.
Hester. What's going on?
Basically, in those 2 chapters,
Yes.
she walked out of jail, and people stared at her, and she felt ashamed. And she went up. Yep, and she made it cry, and she realized that it was a reality, and she had to stand. I don't know what it's called, but the one thing like where you put your head in the one circle and like your wrists in the other 2 circles, and you just had to stand there, and people would watch.
She was on a platform.
Yep.
Is that what it
Like a
was?
gallows? I thought it was called a gallows.
Well,
Sure.
that was different. They talked
Something
about
like
that, but they said that this is a different contraption.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't.
Well, I feel like that was something must have been close
I think it's
to.
like a gallows.
Yeah, because they said
pole.
like
Yeah.
they said like they
They
use
said like the
safety-
height of a man's shoulders or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can picture it in your head.
Yeah.
One chapter just to talk.
I know.
Yes. That is Hawthorne, American literature.
And their women,
Rolling in the
like,
gravy.
what they consider, like, feminine was not what we consider feminine today.
Okay, explain.
So, like, all of them, it's almost like what we would consider manly. Like, they're strong women, like, they're strong-minded. They're not, like, when we say feminine, we think, like, delicate and, like, beautiful and stuff. That's not the way they described it. They worked on their own. They were not, like, skinny and pretty like the way we are today. They were, like, thicker boned and,
Stout.
yeah.
Very like
The way they
Kinda
spoke wasn't, like,
almost
delicate like we would say
masculine,
today.
right?
Yeah.
They have like testosterone. Well,
Yeah, they, well, you know, when you work the land and you live in simpler times, you know, if you think about it, we have become somewhat delicate creatures with our luxuries and what we've become accustomed to. Yeah.
One thing I thought was interesting, they were saying if there was like a Baptist, it's like, would that be like a priest or something? In the
Yes.
crowd of Puritans, that they're talking about, they kind of compared like how Mary, when she had her baby, like he brought, like he came to like save the world, but then the baby that she had brought only just like made her world even darker. I thought that was like a cool contrast the way they did
Yes.
that.
Yes. This, one thing I do like about Hawthorne, he may be challenging to read, but his writing is full of symbolism. And that's one of the reasons I love this book. It's just full of contrasts and dichotomies and makes you think. And when you compare it to our society today, how would Hester be treated today in 2013?
Seemed like a natural thing.
like it'd be like something kind of normal.
Yeah, and what does that say about us as a civilization?
What has the world come to?
Okay, one might say, what has the world come to?
People don't think that marriage is necessary anymore.
Okay,
It's like normal to us now, like no big deal whatsoever. She had a kid and she wasn't married.
Like it's expected that you will have sex before you're married, like that's like the first part of a relationship now.
does that make you sad?
Yeah.
Yes. And
It is
now
bad.
it's harder to find a guy who
So,
doesn't.
I mean, with humans being what basic nature, you can't exactly deny that.
Okay, interesting.
I mean,
Human
like,
nature.
We're all born with a sinful nature, but at the same time, like you have your willpower and
Free will.
And people say
But
that.
I feel like
you need to be able to
it's
strong enough
really
to
to
like
have
choose
more
not
control.
to. Yeah,
Okay,
like
self-control.
use self-control. I
Like,
mean, it's there somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's true.
morals are changing, are they declining?
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people would argue with that. Like they would say that we're becoming like stronger and that it doesn't matter anymore, that we're stepping out. I don't agree with that whatsoever.
I mean,
I think that our
there-
morals are declining.
There are two sides of every story, so.
That's true.
I think that
There's always a different
there's always a
perspective.
different, yeah.
Even in like, back in the one-room schoolhouse days, if the teacher was never allowed to be married. Back in the one-room schoolhouse days, she had to devote all of, it was kinda like a priest. You know, he's married to the church, she was married to the school. And then if she, did get married and got pregnant, she had to quit. She could never let the kids see her in that condition. Yeah.
Can she come back after she had a child?
I'm not sure, because then she wouldn't be pure anymore. Yeah, even
See,
though
that's
that's how
what
we
it's
get the students
But
who are
it's
sitting
like
in front of her.
human, like that's
Yeah,
whatever.
that's how
What?
society keeps going.
It's if you do, it's not sinful if you do it like the right
in a
way.
proper way,
Yeah.
Right.
And you're
So,
old enough and
Right.
you're more mature and like you understand what you're doing.
but they
instead of
felt
just-
back then that the teacher was the role model for the students, and that would not be tolerated. And then even more recently, you know, teenage mothers were whisked away to some aunt in another state and had a baby and then brought back.
My grandma had my mom at 17, and she was taken out of school, and then she didn't go back until after my mom was born, and she put her up for adoption. But now all the pregnant girls go to school anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And you see a lot of.
Well, people, if you get pregnant here, you get checked out.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Here.
Well, good.
And
I would hope that you're not
Here.
dancing with like a child, yeah, but that's not gonna be.
Hopefully, it wouldn't even.
We've never had
I
that
would
happen.
hope so.
Yeah.
Actually,
Wait, we have.
maybe,
Okay, anyway,
I don't know.
so, has society become more open-minded and more tolerant, or have our morals declined?
Moral stuff.
We've definitely become more open, more tolerant, but I don't think that it's okay that we have.
Okay,
I think
I
we use
agree,
that as an
because-
excuse to.
Yeah.
get
We
rid
make
of
it
things.
sound
We say
good.
that we're tolerant, but really we're just using that.
Well, we're
to-
justifying it by
Yeah, we're
saying
ju-
that.
yeah,
okay.
we're, it's like we're becoming more tolerant in a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of the wrong things?
Yeah.
Okay,
like in schools, they hand out condoms
I think
because
that's
they know
sad.
that like, you know, they can't like stop anything, so they'd rather prevent
I think
anything.
it's sad that they have to do that.
But it's
Yeah,
just
that
like,
we've gone.
you're just like pushing them along
I
to
know.
do it, and
You
like,
just-
why don't
They're
they
like,
do
oh,
it?
You
well,
think-
I can do that if
I
I
don't-
like.
you think?
I don't know, like it just, I think there's like two, I don't know.
Mhm.
Like, I don't believe in using those anyway, but I feel like if you hand them to students, you're just saying, hey, here's an excuse to go have sex. And like the school's saying, here you go, I know you're gonna do it anyway, but if you give them that, they feel like they have the freedom to do it because they have a less chance of getting pregnant. And so there's a lesser chance of people finding out that they did that.
Okay.
So
Well,
I
I-
feel like it's not a good idea.
I saw on Facebook like last night or the night before or something like that, I was looking and there was a picture of a girl holding like a pregnancy test. She was like, Mom, I'm pregnant, go call MTV. And I was like, that's
True.
disgusting. It's disgusting.
Mhm.
Like, no. Oh my god.
I think it's just because
Like,
we're
you
more
don't-
like ill-educated.
Or what?
We're more like ill-educated, where like in that kind of subject, it's very neglected.
And
I
also,
feel-
it's like the cycle of like if the mother had a child and she was 16, it's kind of likely for
Yes.
that
Yeah.
child to
Yes.
have.
Cause it's all they know.
Yeah, because
Especially
it's all
if you don't put them up for adoption, like
They
how
don't learn.
my mom.
They don't grow up in a caring environment,
Yeah.
and most likely won't have
And
both
usually the
parents.
man leaves because, you
He
know,
doesn't
when
want
you're
to be
16, it's not likely that he's gonna be the one you grow up and get married. He's not gonna be, like, he's a 15-year-old boy.
He's not
Yeah.
who he's gonna
He's
be when he
not-
grows up yet.
He's gonna change, and that.
Well, he
and
doesn't
then-
want to take on the responsibility.
Yeah, and it bugs me when people are surprised that they're pregnant, because it's like.
Oh, but what did you think
that-
you were doing?
That's
Yeah.
what that is for.
That always, I always say, I mean, I saw a lot of this
You're
in the public
16,
schools.
like,
And so when they say, I was surprised I got pregnant, I always look at them and say, were you having sex? I'm like, yes. I'm like, then don't be surprised. That is a consequence of that, right?
yeah, and it's not like it's still like using protection and
And,
like
like-
taking birth control. It doesn't.
That's why we don't believe in using those, is because we believe that sex is for reproduction, it's for having kids, and if you're using things to prevent that, it's kind of like, it's like
You're
preventing
misusing it.
life. Like you're using
Well,
it
but that's a
for-
Catholic view.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's.
I'm not Catholic and I agree with that.
But, I mean, everyone has their own opinions on that subject.
The majority, most of society does use contraception of some kind. And that's a debate in this country about when kids should start using contraception.
If
Well,
it's
Yeah.
not, if it can also be used for other things.
Yes.
Yes.
Especially if you have like problems.
Don't a lot of them give you cancer though?
Yes, it's not well known,
It's
but
very rare.
What?
It's very
It's a
rare.
possibility
birth
though.
control.
Well, there's
Well, I guess there's for a lot of things.
a lot of
there's
things,
possibility.
a lot of medicine.
Like drinking a water bottle that's been left in the car and
Right.
it's plastic can give you
Right.
cancer.
Yeah, so
Alright, I didn't know that. I do that all the time.
it
Oh,
depends,
you're blind.
it depends if it has BPA in it or
Yeah.
not, your water bottle, yeah, but, anymore, almost anything gives you cancer, but,
Well,
So-
I mean, a cancer cell could enter Mr. Vital.
You have about
like,
4
It's just
every
you
day.
like
poorly
that's
copied.
in- Yeah, but
Yeah,
you
you
poop
already
it
know
out.
it, but then you would just have to hold.
Sorry to do that.
okay, so Hester. Hester has had an affair, and she had a baby, so she can't deny, cause she's not married.
Was it?
What happened to her husband?
Wait,
I
how
was
is
a
that an
little
affair
confused.
though? Because she's not, if she's not married to someone, technically that's not an affair.
Was he married?
I was confused because it was saying something about like
Do you know who
There
the
was
dad is?
she won't get the name.
You'll find out.
But was it saying something like where like in old England she had a husband and he like sent her there?
Yes,
And then like so but he stayed so he can figure out some financial stuff
right,
and then she was there alone.
right. He sent her ahead, and she, had sex with someone in the community and has the baby. What's the baby's name? Pearl. Maybe they haven't told you yet.
No, I don't think we've learned that.
Pearl is what she names the baby, and that's symbolic as well. Okay, anything else in chapter 2 before we move
What was
on?
the guy with the slugging shoulder? Like
Do what?
the guy, because there's the guy and she knows him and he knows her, but it doesn't say how they know each other.
Uh-huh. How do you have any predictions?
That's the guy that she slept with.
Maybe it's her husband that came.
Okay, any other guesses? Okay, let's go to chapter 3. You want me to read a little bit out loud?
Yes.
Okay. From this intense consciousness of being the object of severe and universal observation, the wearer of the scarlet letter was at length relieved by discerning, on the outskirts of the crowd, a figure which irresistibly took possession of her thoughts. An Indian, in his native garb, was standing there. But the red men were not so infrequent visitors of the English settlements. That one of them would have attracted any notice from Hester Prynne at such a time, much less would have excluded all other objects and ideas from her mind. By the Indian's side, and evidently sustaining a companionship with him, stood a white man, clad in a strange disarray of civilized and savage costume. He was small in stature, with a furrowed visage, which as yet could hardly be termed aged. There was a remarkable intelligence in his features, as of a person who had so cultivated his mental part that it could not fail to mold the physical to itself and become manifest by unmistakable tokens. Although by a seemingly careless arrangement of his heterogeneous garb, he had endeavored to conceal or abate the peculiarity, it was sufficiently evident to Hester Prynne that one of this man's shoulders rose higher than the other. Again, at the first instant of perceiving that thin visage and the slight deformity of the figure, she pressed her infant to her bosom with so convulsive a force that the poor babe uttered another cry of pain, but the mother did not seem to hear it. At his arrival in the marketplace, and some time before she saw him, the stranger had bent his eyes on Hester Prynne. It was carelessly, at first, like a man chiefly accustomed to look inward, and to whom external matters are of little value and import, unless they bear relation to something within his mind. Very soon, however, his look became keen and penetrative. A writhing horror twisted itself across his features, like a snake gliding swiftly over them, and making one little pause, with all its wreathed intervolutions in open sight. His face darkened with some powerful emotion, which, nevertheless, he so instantaneously controlled by an effort of his will, that save at a single moment its expression might have passed for calmness. After a brief space, the convulsion grew almost imperceptible and finally subsided into the depths of his nature. When he found the eyes of Hester Prynne fastened on his own, and saw that she appeared to recognize him, he slowly and calmly raised his finger, made a gesture with it in the air, and laid it on his lips. Then, touching the shoulder of a townsman who stood next to him, he addressed him in a formal and courteous manner. "I pray you, good sir," said he, "who is this woman, and wherefore is she here set up to public shame?" "You must needs be a stranger in this region, friend," answered the townsman, looking curiously at the questioner and his savage companion, "else you would surely have heard of Mistress Hester Prynne and her evil doings. She hath raised a great scandal, I promise you, in godly Master Dimmesdale's church." "You say truly," replied the other. "I am a stranger, and have been a wanderer sorely against my will. I have met with grievous mishaps by sea and land, and have been long held in bonds among the heathen folk to the southward, and am now brought hither by this Indian, to be redeemed out of my captivity. Will it please you, therefore, to tell me of Hester Prynne's, have I her name rightly, of this woman's offences, and what has brought her to yonder scaffold?" "Truly, friend, and methinks it must gladden your heart, after your troubles and sojourn in the wilderness," said the townsman, "to find yourself at length in a land where iniquity is searched out, and punished in the sight of rulers and people, as here in our godly New England. Yonder woman, sir, you must know, was the wife of a certain learned man, English by birth, but who had long dwelt in Amsterdam, whence some good time agone he had minded to cross over and cast in his lot with us of the Massachusetts. To this purpose he sent his wife before him, remaining himself to look after some necessary affairs. Marry, good sir, in some 2 years or less, that the woman has been a dweller here in Boston. No tidings have come of this learned gentleman, Master Prynne, and his young wife, look you, being left to her own misguidance." "Aha! I conceive you," said the stranger with a bitter smile. "So learned a man as you speak of should have learned this too in his books. And who by your favour, sir, may be the father of yonder babe? Is it some 3 or 4 months old, I should judge, which Mistress Prynne is holding in her arms?" "Of a truth, friend, that matter remaineth a riddle, and the Daniel who shall expound it is yet a wanting," answered the townsman. "Madame Hester absolutely refuseth to speak, and the magistrates have laid their heads together in vain. Peradventure the guilty one stands looking on at this sad spectacle unknown of man, and forgetting that God sees him." "The learned man," observed the stranger with another smile, "should come himself to look into the mystery." "It behooves him well, if he be still in life," responded the townsman. "Now, good sir, our Massachusetts magistrate, bethinking themselves that this woman is youthful and fair, and doubtless was strongly tempted to her fall, and that moreover, as is most likely her husband may be at the bottom of the sea, they have not been bold to put in force the extremity of our righteous law against her. The penalty thereof is death, but in their great mercy and tenderness of heart, they have doomed Mistress Prynne to stand only a space of 3 hours on the platform of the pillory, and then and thereafter for the remainder of her natural life, to wear a mark of shame upon her bosom. A wise sentence, remarked the stranger, gravely bowing his head. Thus she will be a living sermon against sin, until the ignominious letter be engraved upon her tombstone. It irks me, nevertheless, that the partner of her iniquity should not at least stand on the scaffold by her side. But he will be known. He will be known. He will be known. He bowed courteously to the communicative townsman, and whispering a few words to his Indian attendant, they both made their way through the crowd. Okay, so, what has happened? What did I just read?
The guy he was talking to, who was standing by the Indian, he's supposedly a stranger in town and was asking me about what was going on. One of the townsmen described it to him. And so now he's about to go walk up, I'm assuming, to the platform.
Okay. And what is her punishment?
She just has to stand in there for 3 hours and wear the letter on her chest the rest of her life.
Yes. And the townsperson was explaining to the stranger that it's kind of unfair that the man who got her pregnant isn't standing up there with her, which I think is very forward thinking back then, right? To think that the man should be punished too. Okay. And how do you feel about how she has to wear the A all her life and how it has to be on her tombstone too?
Tombstone is kind of, I feel like that's mean because people will only remember her for that.
And also, like, she should be able to forgive someone, even though it was a sin that she shouldn't have done. Like, I feel like she should have a punishment for them to be able to be forgiven rather than people, like, continuously having this grudge and, like, harsh feelings towards her for something that she messed up on.
I mean, after all, doesn't God forgive?
Yeah.
Shouldn't we?
Yeah.
I feel like she should just like publicly apologize and then it should be over.
Okay.
And honestly, that was kind of like a personal thing. Maybe she needs to apologize to people around her, or people that she offended, but it's not necessarily something that everyone needs to be aware of.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. While this passed, Hester Prynne had been standing on her pedestal, still with a fixed gaze towards the stranger, so fixed a gaze that at moments of intense absorption, all other objects in the visible world seemed to vanish, leaving only him and her. Such an interview, perhaps, would have been more terrible than even to meet him as she now did, with the hot midday sun burning down upon her face and lighting up its shame, with the scarlet token of infamy on her breast, with the sin-born infant in her arms, with the whole people drawn forth as to a festival, staring at the features that should have been seen only in the quiet gleam of the fireside, in the happy shadow of a home, or beneath a matronly veil at church. Dreadful as it was, she was conscious of a shelter in the presence of these 1,000 witnesses. It was better to stand thus, with so many betwixt him and her, than to greet him face to face, they two alone. She fled for refuge, as it were, to the public exposure, and dreaded the moment when its protection should be withdrawn from her. Involved in these thoughts, she scarcely heard a voice behind her, until it had repeated her name more than once, in a loud and solemn tone, audible to the whole multitude. "Hearken unto me, Hester Prynne," said the voice. It has already been noticed that directly over the platform on which Hester Prynne stood was a kind of balcony, or open gallery, appended to the meeting house. It was the place whence proclamations were wont to be made, amidst an assemblage of the magistracy, with all the ceremonial that attended such public observances in those days. Here, to witness the scene which we are describing, sat Governor Bellingham himself, with 4 sergeants about his chair, bearing halberds as a guard of honor. He wore a dark feather in his hat, a border of embroidery on his cloak, and a black velvet tunic beneath. A gentleman advanced in years, and with a hard experience written in his wrinkles. He was not ill-fitted to be the head of the representative of a community, which owed its origin and progress and its present state of development, not to the impulses of youth, but to the stern and tempered energies of manhood, and the somber sagacity of age, accomplishing so much, precisely because it imagined and hoped so little. The other eminent characters by whom the chief ruler was surrounded were distinguished by a dignity of mien, belonging to a period when the forms of authority were felt to possess the sacredness of divine institutions. They were doubtless good men, just and sage. But out of the whole human family it would not have been easy to select the same number of wise or virtuous persons who should be less capable of sitting in judgment on an erring woman's heart, and disentangling its mesh of good and evil, than the sages of rigid aspect towards whom Hester Prynne now turned her face. She seemed conscious, indeed, that whatever sympathy she might expect lay in the larger and warmer heart of the multitude, for as she lifted her eyes toward the balcony, the unhappy woman grew pale and trembled. So she's thankful in a way that she has a crowd around her so she doesn't have to be alone with this stranger. The voice which had called her attention was that of the Reverend and famous John Wilson, the eldest clergyman of Boston, a great scholar, like most of his contemporaries in the profession, and withal a man of kind and genial spirit. This last attribute, however, had been less carefully developed than his intellectual gifts, and was in truth rather a matter of shame than self-congratulation with him. There he stood, with a border of grizzled locks beneath his skull-cap, while his gray eyes, accustomed to the shaded light of his study, were winking, like those of Hester's infant, in the unadulterated sunshine. He looked like the darkly engraved portraits which we see prefixed to old volumes of sermons, and had no more right than one of those portraits would have to step forth, as he now did, and meddle with a question of human guilt, passion, and anguish. "Hester Prynne," said the clergyman, "I have striven with my young brother here, under whose preaching of the word you have been privileged to sit." Here Mr. Wilson laid his hand on the shoulder of a pale young man beside him. "I have sought, I say, to persuade this godly youth that he should deal with you, here in the face of heaven, and before these wise and upright rulers, and in hearing of all the people, as touching the vileness and blackness of your sin. Knowing your natural temper better than I, he could the better judge what arguments to use, whether of tenderness or terror, such as might prevail over your hardness and obstinacy, insomuch that you should no longer hide the name of him who tempted you to this grievous fall. But he opposes to me, with a young man's over-softness, albeit wise beyond his years, that it were wronging the very nature of woman to force her to lay open her heart's secrets in such broad daylight, and in presence of so great a multitude. Truly, as I sought to convince him, the shame lay in the commission of the sin, and not in the showing of it forth. What say you to it, once again, Brother Dimmesdale? Must it be thou or I that shall deal with this poor sinner's soul?" There was a murmur among the dignified and reverend occupants of the balcony, and Governor Bellingham gave expression to its purport, speaking in an authoritative voice, although tempered with respect towards the youthful clergyman whom he addressed. "Good Master Dimmesdale," he said, "the responsibility of this woman's soul lies greatly with you. It behooves you, therefore, to exhort her to repentance and to confession, as a proof and consequence thereof." The directness of this appeal drew the eyes of the whole crowd upon the Reverend Mr. Dimmesdale, a young clergyman, who had come from one of the great English universities, bringing all the learning of the age into our wild forest land. His eloquence and religious fervor had already given the earnest of high eminence in his profession. He was a person of very striking aspect, with a white, lofty, and impending brow, large brown melancholy eyes, and a mouth which, unless when he forcibly compressed it, was apt to be tremulous, expressing both nervous sensibility and a vast power of self-restraint. Notwithstanding his high native gifts and scholar-like attainments, there was an air about this young minister, an apprehensive, a startled, a half-frightened look, as of a being who felt himself quite astray and at a loss in the pathway of human existence. Finish chapter 3, please.